All right, it's 12 o'clock now. I think we'll get started immediately. Again, my name is Rashid Ahmed. I'm the research manager for the McMaster Midwifery Research Center. And we have about 13 people that are joining us today. So thank you again for joining. And I'd like to introduce Kyle McGowan, a research coordinator with the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology here at McMaster, who is very gratefully uh, being able to present this today. So I'll turn it over to Kyle to introduce himself, and we'll get going now. And just a reminder that this presentation is being recorded and will be posted on both the MMRC and ObGyn website for later view. Some materials will be available to learn further about RedCap. And again, this is an introductory workshop. Please chat any questions to either of us, and there'll be a brief poll at the end about this and then other suggestions for future content. So Kyle, take it away, and thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name's Kyle. I use he, him pronouns, and like Rash said, I'm a departmental research coordinator here with ObGyn. I am the resident RedCap expert, I like to say, in the department. I've been using RedCap for a few years now, and I've learned a lot about it and tips and tricks. And innately, I do have a tech background, so it does make me do things a little bit differently in RedCap sometimes, especially when it comes to coding and all of that stuff. We also have Craig joining us today, as you can see behind me. He's quite moody today. I'm not sure why, but yeah, he's been huffing and puffing all morning. So if you hear some huffing and puffing, it's probably him. He's really not. I'm not exactly sure what his problem is. He's just, yeah. I'm gonna share my screen now, and then we'll jump right into it. So bear with me here while I get RedCap up. And if Rash, can you see it okay?
Yes, it's all good.
Perfect. If anybody's having issues seeing it, please just let me know, and we can do some adjustments. Perfect. Okay. So the first topic that we're going to cover today is what is RedCap? Essentially, so RedCap stands for Research Electronic Data Capture. It's a tool that's used in research all over the world, developed by Vanderbilt University in the United States. I think they're based in Texas. It's used for many types of research and many types of projects. It's very versatile in what it can do. It's highly secure, and it utilizes on-site servers for each institution that's maintained by IT professionals to maintain those secure connections. Every person who does access it is required also to have a secure connection, but that's usually innately built into your computer, and it's accessed through a web browser that will establish a secure connection for you. So when you first log into RedCap, this is what you're going to see. How do we access it? Well, every instance of RedCap has its own unique URL. So this is our department URL. You can see it up at the top of my screen here. It's obgynresearch.mcmaster.ca. When you type that into your browser, it's actually going to bring you up to this screen here. This is the login screen. I have to assign you a login and username if you don't have one already. So if you don't have one, please just reach out to me and we can assign you one. It takes like literally 15 seconds. So it's a very quick and easy process, and then you'll have access. When you first log in, you're going to look, these are my projects. When you first log in, you'll see a list of all the projects. I have lots of different projects going on. But this is really where you want to start, is the home page. It gives you some brief instructions, some features that it can do, all of which we're going to be going over a little bit today. Perfect. So that's the first 2 points on the agenda. Quick and easy. What is RedCap? How do I access it? Now we're going to dive into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes. So starting a project in RedCap is actually really easy, but it is dependent on your user rights. So if you are a visitor to the department, chances are you won't be able to start a new project. But if you are a student or a researcher within our department, you should be able to have the permissions to start a new project. If you don't see this green new project button at the top of your screen, let me know and we can definitely adjust your permissions so that you do. So starting a new project is as easy as clicking on this button, giving it a title. I'm just going to make things up as we go today because I'm going to delete the project shortly thereafter. You select the purpose of the project. So if it's practice or just for fun, that's going to be this one because that's what it is. but we also have research, quality improvement, depending on what exactly you're using it for. I can assign it. You can see on my home screen, I have sorting and folders. That's a little bit more advanced stuff that you won't really need to use unless you have insane amount of projects like I do on my RedCap. You can add any notes that you want, any like short summaries. This isn't a necessary field, but if it helps you, you can definitely use it. And then you have a couple of options down here. You can either upload a RedCap project. So this is if somebody sends you a template, you can upload it here. And there's also some templates that RedCap has that are custom generated here. So you can see there's different options. But normally I just create a blank project because it's much easier to customize it towards your exact project needs if you starting from a blank slate. So when you create a new project, this is what it looks like. This is where you're going to get brought immediately, and this is called the project setup page. This is the first step in setting up your project to make sure that it does what you want it to do. There's a few important things that I want to highlight on this page before we dive into building surveys and stuff in RedCap. The first one is using surveys in this project. So RedCap is designed for using surveys, but it is also designed for data collection from team members. So you can log into it and have a project that requires every user who's entering data to log in. This way, data is always tracked and who's entering what data, and you'll be able to see all of that. If you want participants to submit things, or you want to be able to have a URL to submit to send out for collections, for example, a survey, where I'm actually going to send you out a survey in the chat here and during the presentation, so you'll see what I mean. But this is used for anonymous data collection from participants. So you can include identifiers or not include identifiers, which we'll get into. But it's important that if you plan on using any type of survey, that we enable it here. We also have the ability to do longitudinal data collection. So we have the ability to define different time points and different events that are required at each time point. If your study design requires this, this is a very useful tool. Down here under the enable optional modules and customizations, there's a few important things that I wanted to highlight. The first one is repeating instruments. If you have a data collection form that you're using that you're going to be using again and again, make sure this is turned on. That way you only have to create it once. You click a button and it creates a duplicate copy for you to enter in the second instance or whatever that is. It's very helpful so that you don't have to create copy, 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 copy. You can just click the plus button. Scheduling module. This is used in longitudinal studies when you have different time points. You can use this to automatically schedule certain events in your study. The randomization module. So RedCap does have the ability to do randomization for example, randomized control trials. This is a little more advanced, and if you do need randomization, please reach out to us because there are a few advanced setup steps that we do need to set up. And then another really important thing that I like to highlight that's useful in RedCap is the ability to automatically send surveys to participants. So if you have a survey where you need to collect data at certain time points, let's say 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you can program an email in here using this field. So you would click on this and it'll ask you what field would contain the email. And this will then tell RedCap, anytime RedCap needs to send out an invitation, please use this email. The rest of this page we'll get to in a little while, but it is handy to explore this page if you have some time. So when you're in RedCap playing around, definitely have a look and see what other settings you have. Perfect. So now I built a project for today so that we can jump right into it without having to go through all the little things. So, before we jump into that, ethics. So ethics requirements. There are a few requirements of ethics for using RedCap. The first is we can populate and create projects before we have ethics approval. I highly encourage this. Ethics does usually take quite a while, and so it is handy to have the projects built and ready to go. So when ethics comes, we can start recruitment. But we're not allowed to distribute or use the public distribution tools until we do have ethics approval. All non-Mac users, so if you're not a McMaster member, whether that be a student, faculty, staff, etc., We do require full ethics approval before we can add guest users. This is just a requirement from the university to make sure that everything is kosher and then that person has ethics approval to be able to see the study data. And then if you're also a non-McMaster user, for example, we do have a lot of people who come in that are research volunteers, or we have research people on research clerkships, all of this stuff. Their accounts will automatically be limited at 1-year intervals. If the person does anticipate the project to take longer, after the 1-year interval, RedCap will automatically send a message to them about 2 weeks before their account is set to expire. And it'll say you can send an email to the administrator to extend your access. At that point, there should be an email and a link in there that you can send that comes right to me to extend your access. So just to re-summarize that, so all non-McMaster users are limited to a 1-year interval. However, it's very easy to extend. So if the project is taking longer or the project is anticipated to be longer, we can extend those intervals. So now we're going to jump into building a questionnaire or building a survey or whatever it is that we're going to be using RedCap for. So the first thing is, what is an instrument? An instrument is each one of these is called an instrument. So each one of these is a different questionnaire, a different survey, a different whatever you want it to be. Different pages of data collection instruments. When we go into an instrument, this is where we contain our fields. So what is a field? Each one of these is a field. Each question, each description is considered a field. When we go into the field, each field has a variable name. Every variable name has to be unique. RedCap won't let you put 2 of the same. It'll yell at you. This is so that when you export the data, this is what's in your header at the top of your information. I recommend that these be very descript, because short but descript, so that when you're looking at your database, when you're done data collection, you know exactly what that data field is. And then what is a field label? A field label is what is displayed to the user. So you see here, this says notes box, this says text box. That's what's called the field label. This is what's going to be facing towards the participant if they have a survey. This is what's facing towards the research assistant when they log in to enter data. The field label is really where you're going to put what you want in that field. RedCap does have a wide range of different fields, which we're going to go through a little bit here. Perfect, yes. So we're going to go through all of these fields here just to see what it can do, what other options we have, and then a short summary of how each field works. So the first one that we have here is a text box. A text box is used for short, free text. You can put whatever you want. See, I can type in all of that in for random letters, but it's really used for short data collection. I would say usually about 500 characters or less in this box, just because if you start to put in more information, it can confuse data analysis software when you export the data. The next one is very similar to a text box. It's called a notes box. This is used for anything greater than 500 characters. I would use this for any extra information. If you're asking them to type in a little bit more, a paragraph or more, whatever that kind of information is, use the note box to do that. Within the text box, excuse me, we do have an option for validation. So what this means is that we can force the person who's entering data to type the data in a specific format. So if we click on this little button here, we can see these are all the different formats that are available. If I click on a date, then it's going to make me type it in based on that date selection. So I would have to type it in the format day, month, year, or RedCap's going to give a big red pop-up that says, this is in the incorrect format. Please type in as. You can set it to be an email so that you have to have text@text.com, an integer, a number, phone numbers, times. Zip code is only for the US, so that unfortunately doesn't work here. But every other one of these can be useful. So when you're building the field, if you need a specific format of information, definitely utilize those. You can also make every field required or specific fields based on the project need. This will force participants when entering information. If they try to submit and this field is blank, RedCap will pop up saying, error, please populate this field. So for an international phone number, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to validate those. It would have to just be a free text box. But it's just a limitation with the RedCap program, and unfortunately, there's no way around that. Another important one here is the identifier. If the information that you're collecting is considered personal health information, I would highly suggest checking off that this is an identifier. You'll see a little bit later on that when you do mark something as an identifier, you have more ability to limit who sees this information to protect patient confidentiality or to protect participant confidentiality, depending on what's being stored in the project. The next one I want to highlight is a calculated field. Similar to Excel, we do have the ability to have fields do simple calculations or more advanced calculations based on your programming skills. In this field, I currently don't have an equation because there's no data, so it wouldn't be able to show us anything. But you can use this field to have certain fields, certain calculations. For example, BMI, if you collect height and weight, you can automatically type in the equation here so that when you export the database, the BMI is automatically calculated and displayed in your final database. There are, if you are using this, I do definitely recommend using these 3 buttons here. These 3 buttons will pop up different explanations about what each thing is and how to properly type in the information, the proper syntax for all of the code. When you're using the calculated fields, I would definitely look under special functions. This is where you're going to find a lot of examples, but also the list of what calculations RedCap is able to do. There are ones that are very similar to Excel. So if you are an Excel user, you may feel like you're typing things in very similar, but just be careful because a lot of the things are slightly different in how they're typed in. So just make sure. When you type in an equation that's valid, so we're going to go 1 + 1. You're going to get a little thing down here, and it's going to say valid. So that's RedCap doing a very simple check that when it tries to run this equation, it works. It doesn't return an error. However, that doesn't mean that it's going to give you exactly what you want. This is just saying that your syntax is correct. So if I notice here, if I was to put equals 1 + 1 like I would in Excel, that's an error in syntax, and I know something's wrong. Okay, I'm not going to save it and exit it until this is green. The next field that we have are multiple choice fields. There's 3 different options for multiple choice fields. There's a list, there's a button, and then there's checkbox. The list and the buttons are very similar in that they both, you can only select one option, and it's really just a preference on how you want the information displayed. So if I was to click on this, you can see I have the options or I have radio buttons. That's a complete preference choice. There isn't really a major difference when it comes to how RedCap treats those fields. So if I click on this button here, you can see this is what it looks like when I want to program a multiple choice question. So in my field label, I put in what I wanted it to look like. I put in a variable name. And then now I have to choose, what are my choices? What do I want the participant to be able to select? So you have to assign a variable number to each option so that when you export the database, RedCap will export this value and not this value. And that's kind of important because, well, you can actually export both values, but for now we're going to stick with, it will export the numerical value for you. That's important because a lot of data analysis softwares require a numerical value to be able to run any of their analyses. And so RedCap will automatically export the numbers for you to make it easier to import that database. You can select what these numbers are. And the syntax for it is just the number and a comma, and then what text you want displayed. Anything after the comma is what RedCap is going to show here. And so show here, or in this box here. And so that's how you would program these, is you would just select your number, put a comma, and then the option. I used 1 for yes, no, 0 for no, and then 3 for maybe. And then when I have a prefer not to answer, this is just a preference, like to put a number that's way out of the range of all the other options to automatically tell my eyes, oh yes, they chose not to answer that question. Checkboxes are treated a little bit differently in RedCap. Checkboxes are when you want to be able to select more than one option in a multiple choice question. This is useful for a lot of different applications, and it's programmed the same as every other multiple choice question. You put your answers here, your variable name here, and what you want it to display here. The main difference is RedCap, when you're programming for example, a branching logic, or you're using this in any other case of RedCap, it's typed in a little bit differently because there could be this option and this option checked. So we need to tell RedCap, okay, what do we do if 1 is checked, or what do we do if 2 is checked, etc. Which I'll get into when I get into the branching logic in about 3 minutes. The next one that we have are yes, no. So this is very self-explanatory. It's a multiple choice, yes, no. You can't change the choices, but it is handy for those, so you don't have to waste all the time typing in yes, no. The same with true and false. It's the same dichotomous choice. You can't change what the values are, but you can change the field label and the variable name. The next field is file upload. The file upload field is very finicky. It's not designed to handle big files. It's not designed to handle really most of what we would be using a file upload field for in today's world. It's the limit is like, I think maybe half a megabyte before you'll get an error, or it'll just continuously spin endlessly. So I do definitely, if you plan on using a filed upload field, reach out to the ObGyn research office to see if what you're used for it will actually work. Next, we have the visual analog scale. This is a sliding bar. You can program this to say whatever you want it to. For this example purposes, I just used pain, moderate pain, and severe pain. And you can choose however you want to program it, from a min value to a max value of whatever you desire. And then if you want labels, all of this stuff. The last thing I wanted to show you, well, there's actually two more field types that we're going to show you. The descriptive text box. So the descriptive text box is very useful when giving instructions, descriptions, if you want to insert videos, if you want to insert pictures into your surveys for example purposes. And so this is where the participant won't be able to input any data, or the research assistant won't be able to put in any data, but it will allow you to put in whatever free text that you want. In every field type up to this point, at the very top of the field label box, there's a little checkbox that says use the rich text editor. If you click on this, it opens up the field label to give you more options to customize how your text looks. You can change the color, you can change the size of the fonts a little bit. You can add hyperlinks, you can do all of that stuff using the rich text editor. So that is an option too if you're trying to make it prettier. I lost my section header. That's okay, we'll just add one. So the last thing I wanted to show you was the Begin New Section button. So the Begin New Section button will show up brighter and in bolder font than the rest of the fields. And this only gives you the option to type in what you want the title of your new section to be. So I'm just going to type in new section, and I'm going to hit save. And you can see here it inserts this kind of pale yellow bar, and this indicates to RedCap and to the user that we're in a new section. So as I mentioned earlier, fields can be marked as identifiers. If there's a personal identifier, it should always be marked as such, and this allows for the proper management of user rights. Similarly, with a required field, we already covered. If you wanted it to be a required field, they must enter a value, or RedCap gives them a big error saying, something's wrong, please fill in the following fields. And again, with the field validation. So for the example here, I used email. So anything that types into this box has to be formatted as an email. Right now I'm in the builder, so RedCap's not going to give me all of the errors. I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. But that's what the validation is used for. Next, in fields, there's this little red box at the bottom of all of the fields called action tags. Action tags are used to tell RedCap how you want certain fields to be treated. So, for example, this field, I've typed in the action tag @hidden_survey. That tells RedCap when a participant is looking at the public survey, don't show this field. This field is only for people who have login privileges. All of the action tags, if you click on this little red button right under the box, all of the action tags that you can use are available here to read through, and a good description with examples on how to use them. So for this one here, I passed it. I used hidden survey, and so it hides the fields only on the survey page and not on the data entry form. The field will stay hidden even if its branching logic tries to tell RedCap to show it. So these are very useful when you really want to add those final customization. Branching logic. So branching logic is when you only want fields to be displayed when other things are true. So for example, let's say that you want a field that has all of the summary of past surgeries, and you have a question in there that says, have you ever had surgery before? Yes, no. We can program RedCap to only show the field asking for more details if the participant responds yes to having previous surgeries. And we use that's called branching logic. So to tell RedCap or to program the branching logic for any field, what we do is we click on this little green arrow button here. And when you hover over it, you can see a little hover that says branching logic. When you click on that, you're given either the drag and drop logic builder or the advanced branching logic syntax. The drag and drop logic builder is actually a little bit more confusing than it seems. So I don't recommend using that. I recommend using the advanced builder. And that's only because it allows us to type in exactly what we want. And so in this case here, you can see I have a field in the project called first name. So to tell RedCap, I want this field to only show if the first name field is full. So you can see down here, it gives you a list of fields that you currently have or you can use. But I know that I want to use the first name field. So I'm going to open a square bracket. I'm going to type in the first few letters, and then I can see here, oh, first name appears, and I'm going to click on it. RedCap populates the rest of it. Perfect. Now, I only want first name to show if the field is blank. So if the field is not blank. So this is if not. These are just little syntax logics that are used for calculations on pretty much every computer program. It's does not equal, plus, equals. They're all pretty similar. Subtract, multiply, divide. So this doesn't equal blank. Or I could say the first name doesn't equal test, for example. Or doesn't equal whatever you want it to be would have to be in quotes. So it doesn't equal test. Okay, so if any value other than the letters test are put in there, then it will display this field. And you can use that for many instances: yes, no, multiple choice, blanks, not blanks. You can add basic calculations. So if first name plus last name equals something, for example, it's pretty versatile in what it can do. So it's very powerful. Again, you can utilize the smart variables and special functions in this box, and it does give you the ability to pull those up whenever you're building it, which is a very useful resource that even I still use because I just go and copy and paste. It's much quicker than trying to type out all of the syntax sometimes. Another thing that RedCap can do is it can pipe information. So it can pull information that's been entered already into the field that you want. So for example, I've piped this field here. So first name. If I was to type a value into the first name box up at the top, it will show me down here whatever is typed up in that box. When you click on a field and you wanted to use piping, how to use is right here. And then you can see smart variables, field embedding, and piping. When you click on piping, it gives you all of the instructions, where it can be used, when it can be used, and different examples for you there. Next, we have embedding. So embedding is when you want to move a field and put it beside something else. I use this, for example, when I give options in surveys for other. When the participant selects other, instead of having a field pop up below that says, please describe, I'll just have a box pop up right beside the other option. And to do that, you use field embedding. And embedding will pull that option and display it wherever the text is. And so you see here, I just made a field called embed X for embed example, and I put it up here. And you can tell it's properly embedded because you get these little notifications here that tell you. And so if I was to view this page from a data entry point of view, this box is going to be displayed down here instead of here. One note about embedding fields, the field label doesn't matter in embedded fields because it doesn't pull that information. It only pulls the data entry field. And so in the case of a text box, it only pulls this up here. And so it's going to display as a blank field. And you would have to put descriptive text beside said blank field if you're doing something like that. If it was a multiple choice options, for example, though, those options would populate right below where this text is, and I would have the option to select them right in there. So those are the types of different types of fields. I'm going to go to the records. I'm going to create a record here. And so this is how we would add a new participant, for example. We would go to record status dashboard and add a new record. And I'm going to go into this field types just so you can see what it kind of looks like if I was a research assistant entering data. So if I logged in and this was a text box, the note box, all of this stuff, but we're going to go down here and you can see what I was explaining about the field embedding here, how it's just this blank line with no field label beside it. It's handy in certain instances, like for example, with the others or things like that. Or I could even put a description beside here and it helps condense it a little bit. It's really a cosmetic thing at the end of the day. Because there's no value in the first name box yet, you can see that RedCap is displaying nothing. That's blank. So let's go find first name and just type in a value. First name, my name's Kyle. So now when I go back down here, you can see those lines have now changed to Kyle. And so that's just another example of the piping. Perfect. Okay, so those are the main field types. I often describe RedCap as Google Forms on steroids because it really is similar to building Google Forms in that you choose your question type, you add your options, all of that kind of stuff. You just have a lot more customizability when you're using RedCap. I'm not going to save this. We don't need to save this. I was just using that for example. So now I want to enable surveys, which I showed you how to do a little bit earlier. So we're going to enable the surveys for this project. So I've built my survey here, just a basic example survey. What is your home department? Have you ever used RedCap for research in the past? That I made a required value. Please select the option that best describes your position at McMaster. Please describe your current position at McMaster if it's other. So I don't fit any of these categories. This has branching logic to tell RedCap I only want this field to display if that option is selected. And then I have date completed. So this field I have auto-populated using action tags. So it's not going to show this to the participant because I've told it to be a hidden survey. And then using this today function, I'm telling RedCap automatically populate it with the date of the computer when the person uses it. So this is my example survey that I made quickly just to show what's next. So now let's say we've built that, we're ready to go. We want to be able to send this to people. We have to enable this as a survey. So to do that, we click on this designer button, which brings us to our instrument list. Right beside the instrument, you'll see a green button here. It says enabled as survey with an enable button. When you click on that, it's going to load the survey setting. That will display at the top of the screen. So instructions. Green. We can change the width if we want. We can add logos to the top. We can change how the survey looks. And so if you come down here, this gives you an example of what your current survey would look like. Just it always uses these same example questions, but this is what it'll currently look like if the user was to view it. So I can change themes, I can change the text, I can change font size, all just by using these options here. Yeah, I can change what the radio button and checkboxes look like. So if I change it, you can see it goes from this little very simple button to a more larger in your face button. It's really up to how you want your survey to look. Under that, we do have more options. So question numbering, if you want page, and in this case, I would change that option. Or you have it as a single page where it's continuous scroll from the start to the finish, or continuous fill from start to finish. If you want participants to be able to download a copy of it when they're done, if you want to save a PDF copy, I don't recommend doing this. It just takes up server space, and you can always export copies of it at any point. If there's an email field that you want specifically for it, however, the email field on the settings page that I showed you at the beginning will overwrite this option. So I recommend just using the project level email field and not the survey level one. For required fields, this will show must provide value so that so it denotes to the participant this is required. A whole bunch of different things, speech to text. And then down here, when the survey, you can limit how many responses you get. You can type in, a little sorry message for if the response limit's met, time limits, expiration, save and return options. And then down here, you have survey termination options. This gives you the option of what happens when the participant is done entering their data. Most of the time, you're just going to have a survey completion text. And that's going to say whatever you want it to do. Thank you for providing your information. You can contact us at blah, 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 whatever you want it to be. And when the user hits the submit button, this is what will be displayed. And then it'll say, you may now close this window. Options, so stop options. If you have certain questions where if a participant answers in one way, that's where you want the survey to end. That's when you would use the stop options. So have you been pregnant in the past? For a survey on pregnancy experiences, have you been pregnant before? If the survey person says no, well, they don't have any pregnancy experiences in the case of our study. I don't want to take away from if they do, but for example purposes, if they would say no, the stop option or the stop action would say, sorry, you don't qualify to answer the rest of the questions, or whatever you want it to say. This is used if you're using RedCap for e-consenting, which I do all the time. It is very helpful. You can collect signatures. You can collect lots of different things. And so Auto Archiver and e-consent framework, what this does is it will save a PDF copy of your instrument that you designate as your consent form. And so you have your consent form saved as a copy for regulatory purposes. You can still collect it digitally, and everybody's happy. And then email confirmation. So when a survey, if you want RedCap, if there's an email designated, RedCap will also send an email to participants if you want it to, saying whatever you need it to when they're done the survey. So if there was more information that they needed and you wanted to be sent to their inbox instead of just displayed on the page, you would type that in here. You can also include a copy of a completed survey. So if you're using it, for example, e-consenting, and you want to automatically tell RedCap, okay, well, they've signed it, they get their copy now, you can include the PDF copy in that confirmation. Oops. Perfect. So now I've enabled my example survey as a survey. What do I do now? How do I send it to participants? So RedCap has a couple of different options when it comes to sending out surveys. We have an option called, go over to the survey distribution tools. So this is when I enable a survey, I now have a new option over here called survey distribution tools. This is what you're going to use to send the survey out. Pretty self-explanatory. So we have two options here. We have the public survey link and the participant list. The participant list is used when you have a list of participants or when you're manually adding participants to answer the questionnaires that you created. If you want to distribute a public URL, for example, a public survey on satisfaction. Oops. I'll fix that in a minute. You would click on public survey link. That will give us a URL. One of the caveats of having a public link is that the form or the survey that you're going to be using has to be the first one in the list, because RedCap wants to tie this field here with the response. However, because this isn't a survey, it's not going to show this to participants, and it's required that we add in a record to then send it out. But if I make our survey the first one in the list, but just by clicking and dragging it, and I go back to survey distribution tools, I now have a public survey link. So this here is the link that's going to send that you can send. It's a public URL. If I was to copy it and paste it into my browser here, you can see it pulls up the survey instructions display at the top of the screen, participant survey, the questions. I don't fit into any of these categories, then populates this field here. Or if I select any other option, it doesn't. And then the submit button at the bottom. You can either open the public survey, you can open it and then log out of this. You can send it via email. You can create a QR code right here. And then you can copy and paste this wherever you need it to. One of the most useful things that I think would be most utilized when it comes to distributing public surveys is using either a short survey link or a custom survey link, which you can use. You can use either or both right here. When you click custom survey link, you can see here it really shortens what the URL is and lets you choose what you want it to be. So for example, practice. Oh. Let's find a URL. Testing project. Perfect. And so just so you can see, for example purposes, this is the new link. And if I was to click on this, it brings me to the exact same place. So this link, this customized link does not overwrite the original link. You can still use that, or if you've used it as a hyperlink somewhere, for example, it doesn't erase this. It just adds this so that you have a shorter one to distribute, or that's easier to distribute. So for participants list, if I was to, for example, let's say I wanted to send this to a list of participants that I've collected already. I'm going to add this, and then I'm going to type in the information. So if this was me, I'm going to type in my email, and I'm going to click add participant. And then from here, you have a couple of different options. You can compose a survey invitation, and you see here, it's going to send it to all of the people who haven't gotten one, or I can automatically select. If there was more if I had added more participants, they would all show here for whoever hasn't gotten one yet. I can send it immediately. I can schedule it, resend if it isn't responded to, and then I can customize exactly what the message says. And so when I click on send invitations, what that will do is RedCap will automatically send that from the RedCap email to all of the listed participants. And so those are your two main options when it comes to distributing your survey. Survey invitation log is used to track. And so when you come over to survey invitation log, any survey that RedCap sends out, it will record when it sends it out, what email it sends it to, the time it sent it, and if it's been responded to yet. And so obviously I haven't sent anything out, so nothing is being populated here. But you can really customize it based on what you want it to do. So only sent invitations, scheduled invitations, anything that failed to send, anything that was deleted. And it will show in a report list style here for you to check. So now I've gone over the field types. I've gone over how to send out your surveys. So now we've theoretically, we've built a survey, we've checked it, we've enabled the survey, and now we've sent it out. We have data. What are we going to do? How do we check that data? How do we see what's been collected? So to do that, we go to the record status dashboard over here. When we click on record status dashboard, this is going to give us a summary in a table of exactly what information we have collected. So you can see in record 1, an example survey was completed. And we see this is complete because it's up here. We can use this little legend up here to tell us what each of them mean. So we have a survey 1 that was completed. If we click on this, we can see the information that was included. If there was more, obviously, they would all populate back on the record status dashboard right here, and you would be able to go into whatever record you wanted. How do I? Okay. The next thing I wanted to cover is testing a questionnaire before you send it. One of the things that RedCap does really well is reminding you to make sure your projects are tested and edited well before you distribute them. And there's really no set way to do this. My recommendation when it comes to testing your project is have a few people that are working with you on the project or a few people that are close to you pretend to fill it out. Send it to them using the way you think you would send it to them during real data collection so that you can see, 1, is my distribution method working? And then 2, ask them, make up some fake data. Who cares? It's all going to be erased at the end of it anyways because it's fake. It's practice data. So make some data up, enter things. See where the form doesn't work or where the survey doesn't work, or if it does work the whole way, fantastic. And that's really the best way I've found to test projects, is because just having different sets of eyes looking at it before it goes live. That being said, when a project does go live, not all hope is lost. If there's still small errors, you can go back and change things in the settings page. However, we recommend doing that as little as possible, because once real data starts getting collected, it can really affect data integrity if you start to change a lot of the project. And so really, when you have participants fill it out using the survey or logging in and entering it as if they were a research assistant, that's going to test your branching logic. It's going to test if all of your options are there. For multiple choice questions, it really lets you see for any incorrect grammar, spelling and grammar, all of that options. So it's important to make sure that your projects are well reviewed, well edited, and refined before they go live. So data entry. I've talked a lot about whether we can do surveys or data entry. Data entry from a participant would usually always be done through survey distribution tools. We're not going to assign RedCap accounts to participants just so they can log in to report data. We're going to give them a survey using a URL. They can enter the data. But let's say a research assistant is hired and they have a stack of papers beside them and they're doing manual data entry for a project. What they'll do is they'll come to the record status dashboard or the Add Edit Records button and click Add New Record. Either one, there's a big green button that says Add New Record. When they do that, the branching logic and everything should exist in here, except anything this shows because it was a hidden survey and not hidden field. And so it shows for the data person who's entering data, but not for the survey participants in this instance. And so they could type in the data, save and exit, and then the same if they wanted to add, okay, I've done that one, we're going to go and do this. And so those are the really 2 main ways to enter data into it. Now I have all of this data. I've checked it. I've looked at it. Okay, I want to export it. I want my database. What am I going to do? Over on the side of here, if you have the user privileges from the creator of the project, you'll have a little tool that says Data Exports, Reports, and Stats. When we click on that, it's going to bring up this menu here. We have RedCap Data Exports, Reports, and Stats. And this window here is where we're going to pull our data from. So you can create reports based to show you whatever kind of information you want, just like you would in any data analysis software. using basic logic or drag and drop as well. Excuse me. But all data, this is where we're going to get all of our final database from. So we see this field here. It says all data, all records in fields. And then we have three options. We can either use stats and charts and customize what we want to show. We can view the report in RedCap, which will give us a chart, or we can export the data. So exporting the data is what we want. And so you can see there's a few different options here that you can export it in. If you're going to be using SPSS, for example, to analyze this, if you know your database is clean, you can automatically export it from the SPSS into SPSS format. However, if your database isn't clean and you need to go through it and clean it, I do recommend using just a CSV Excel, one of these two options here. And you have two options for Excel spreadsheets. You have the raw data. That's when I was saying when you're entering your multiple choice information, it's going to show the number. If you type in labels, that's going to show the text beside it. Or in most cases, it should show the text beside it. There are some instances where it doesn't, but in most cases, it should show the label, which is the text, and not the number that you typed in. So that's really your two options. You would click on it. You have the identification options here. So if you had identifiers and you wanted them to not be exported in the database, you can choose all of that customization stuff. I wouldn't touch any advanced data formatting options. If you want this to remain the way it is, this is just the instructions on how programs are going to handle the file. So we're going to export this data. And then we get this pop-up. Okay, it was successful. It's compiled all into this format. I'm going to download it. And you can see I've now downloaded the database. I don't really have any data in here, so it's going to be like two Excel fields and boring. So I'm not gonna open it for you because there isn't any real data to show. But that's how you would export the data. Similarly, you can import data if you have a spreadsheet that you have from another project, a past project that you're expanding on. You export the data to clean it. You want to import the clean data back into RedCap to whatever the instance may be. You can go to the data import tool. When you go to the data import tool, this is where you're going to get the template that you need to enter. So make sure that you download the template and format what you want to input into the same format. And then you'll upload it in here. And if I was to upload a file, it would just then populate all of the records with that data. So the last thing I want to cover in today is the user rights page. So as I mentioned, there are user rights. So guests, people who are entering data, research assistants, different levels of authorization for seeing different levels of data. And so how can we control what each user sees? We're going to control that on the data, the user right page. So down here on the sidebar, if you have the if you've been assigned user rights by the person who created the project, you would click on this. In this case, I'm the only one in the project, so I should have full rights, or else that would be an issue. So you come in here and you can see, let's say I wanted to add, I have a test. Let's say I wanted to add this test account. I'm going to type in the username of the person that I'm trying to add in this search box here. I'm going to add them with custom rights. And so in this custom rights box, this is where you can really assign what each person is able to do and see. And so if I was adding this research coordinator test account who was going to be an RA entering data, and I didn't want them to be able to modify how the project looks, I'm not going to check off this box. I don't want them to give themselves more permissions, so I'm not going to check off user rights. And then data access groups, I'll show you in 1 second. It's more advanced user rights. I'm not going to check that. But I want them to be able to send out the survey, schedule things, view the reports, some charts. I don't want them to import any data. I don't want them to compare data. They don't get access to the overall logs. So you can really see here, there's lots of different options. I want them to be able to create records, but I don't want them to be able to delete records. And then this is viewing and exporting data up here. And so if things were identified, you can control if this person's able to see the identified information. And so if I was to click on this, they would not be able to see any of the information, but any of the de-identified information, but would be able to access all the other information. If I didn't give them access, so no access, they can't see they can't export any information from these surveys. The same as viewing and editing them. You can make it so they can read only, they can edit, or they can add using this box here. And when you add users to RedCap, I do recommend leaving this notify users checked off. That's just a little, I use it as a checkpoint to make sure that the right person was added and that they were added correctly to the project. They'll get an email. And so I always say, if I've added you to the project, please make sure you get that email, or else something went wrong and we'll figure out what it is. So I'm not going to add the user because then I'm just going to get the email. But yeah, so that's really the basics of using RedCap, customizing RedCap for using it in basic instances. Some ability to control the user rights. Oh, DAGs. Sorry, data access groups. Data access groups are more advanced user rights. These are used when there's different privileges, mostly used when there's more than one site and you're trying to control what people at each site can see. And so data access groups, you can create different groups. For example, McMaster versus HHS. Or no, sorry. Let's do MMRC versus St. Joe's. So if I wanted everyone at St. Joe's only to have access to St. Joe's records, the information that's been entered at St. Joe's, I'm going to create a data access group called St. Joe's. Anybody that I assign to said data access group is only going to be able to see data that was entered under St. Joe's. The same would be the same for MMRC. If I was to enter a data access group for MMRC and assign people to it, those people are only going to be able to see the data for MMRC. And so this is used, like I said, mostly for when there's multiple sites, but there are some instances where you can use this for the same site stuff if you have different levels of people working on the project. So I think that is pretty much it for my basic run through. Was there any comments, any questions, concerns anybody wanted to ask before we wrap up? Perfect.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I was going to say, I texted everyone, please raise your hand or feel free to jump in. We have Susanna. Please go ahead, Susanna.
Hi, Cal. Thank you so much for taking the time to show us RedCap. I just had a question in terms of the projects. I know that you had 2 instruments there.
yep.
But how do you make sure that the link goes to the field type and not the example? Oh, sorry, the opposite way.
Sorry.
The link that you share for the public
Yep.
to complete, it goes to the example survey and not the other instrument, right?
Yes. So it goes to the example survey. So if I was to open this designer, it goes to this example survey that has the green checkbox here. Because there's no green checkbox, RedCap says, okay, when they're done filling out this, end the survey for them. We're not going to bring them anywhere else.
Okay. For example, in my case, I have created an instrument as a survey and another instrument for the consent form as a consent information. How do I make sure that the consent goes to the next instrument?
That's a great question. So if I'm going to enable this as a survey just very quickly here to show you as an example. Perfect. So these are both surveys now. So if I wanted, when the person completed this, I want it to go right to the next survey, I'm going to use the survey options up here, and I'm going to click this survey queue button. When I click on this survey queue button, I can then tell RedCap, okay, so this is not activated because this is the public URL. This is the URL you're going to send out. I renamed the survey in the survey settings, so it's showing me what the real title of it is. So you would click, this one is the URL. You don't need to activate it because this is what's going to automatically show when the person clicks the link. This is the one we want to follow up. So if this was your consent survey, this first one here was your consent survey, and this was your actual survey, I'm going to click on this little activate button. And I'm going to say, okay, when the following survey is completed, so when participant survey is completed, it's going to automatically bring me auto start. It's going to automatically start the next survey, and I'm going to click save. So now let me just show you, for example, I go back to the survey distribution tools and I open the survey and I just it automatically pulls me right into that next survey. And so you can see here, this was my examples one that I had the text box and all of that stuff in.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Tanya was just asking the question if RedCap is used for quantitative projects, which it is most often, although you can use it for mixed methods with limited kind of qualitative responses. Short answers can be exported into Excel, for example, and then imported into in vivo.
Yeah, it is. It does have limitations when it comes to qualitative studies. Sorry. You can collect the data in RedCap, but there's really not a lot of analyzation you can do within RedCap. It's limited by very computer coded logic, if that makes sense. And so programs like NVivo, for example, are built around the idea of coding into those qualitative studies, where RedCap is just designed to be collecting it. And then they've added those little bits of extra stuff on afterwards. So that's a really good point when it comes to highlighting that RedCap isn't really supposed to be your analysis tool. It's not supposed to be, it's not powerful enough to show you really deep details when it comes to what your data is, but it is a very, very powerful collection tool for getting that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. This is great. We are at 1 o'clock right now. Kyle, I don't know if you have a few minutes in case anyone has any further questions.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to stick around for a minute or two.
Otherwise, just as a reminder before people go, that we will, this video is being recorded and I will edit it and distribute it to participants today with a link within the next week. Please feel free to contact me directly at MMRC@McMaster.ca if you have any questions for Kyle that I can direct to him. And as a reminder, students, postdocs, undergraduates, graduates that are affiliated with one of the MEP master's undergraduate program or are affiliated with a faculty member in ObGyn does have access to RedCap that Kyle can provide upon request. And Kyle, that was great. I really appreciate that. A quick poll if people have an opportunity, just to let us know any feedback about today's presentation, and if you have any suggestions for other workshops that we can host in the future, and that would be great. Kyle, thanks very much. We really appreciate. It was a very useful and detailed way. I think everyone's going to go this afternoon and play with RedCap. I think I'd like to. And
one more thing I forgot to highlight quickly before. I know people are jumping off, but this will be in the recording. So one of the nice things too about RedCap, where I learned a lot of my RedCap skills from, and where I definitely recommend checking out for further information. If you go back to the homepage when you first log in, along the toolbar where you can see your projects, new project, all of that, everybody will have access to this tab here called Training Videos. I definitely recommend checking these out if you're struggling along the way. There's some short summaries and then more detailed ones based on what you want to do. But these are really, really well done videos that will give you step-by-step guides to get you where you want to go.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very useful. It seems like there's a lot of helps and videos throughout the whole survey creation process. And I suspect that many participants here will be using this primarily for launching surveys. All right, if there's no other questions, then I'll post the poll one more time. I think we had some people that wanted to see it. Should be there. Otherwise, thanks very much, Kyle, and thanks everyone for joining us today.